I warmly welcome you to the series of Driftaway Tales. Chapter 1: The Gathering Storm. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of Thornfield Manor. That stately pile of grey stone that had stood sentinel over the Berkshire countryside for 3 centuries. It was the first Saturday of September, 1935, and the house was alive with the subdued bustle of weekend guests, arriving for what promised to be a most agreeable gathering. Sir Edmund Thornfield, master of the estate, stood at the great bow window of the library, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the motorcars arrive, one by one, along the gravel drive. He was a man of 62 years, tall and distinguished, with iron-grey hair and a military bearing that spoke of his years in India. Yet there was something in his posture, now a tension in his shoulders, a tightness about his jaw that suggested his thoughts were far from pleasant. "They're all coming, then." The voice belonged to his wife, Lady Margaret Thornfield, who entered the library with her characteristic quiet grace. She was a handsome woman of 58, elegant in dove-grey silk, with perfectly coiffed silver hair and eyes that missed very little. All of them, Sir Edmund confirmed without turning. "Gerald arrived an hour ago. Vivian's just come up the drive with that artist fellow she's taken up with, and I expect Reginald will be here before dinner." His weekend party at Thornfield Manor had been Sir Edmund's idea. Conceived 3 weeks earlier after the reading of his elder brother's will. The late Lord Thornfield had died childless, and his considerable fortunes, well as a number of uncomfortable secrets, had passed not to Sir Edmund, as might have been expected, but into a complex trust with provisions that affected everyone in the family. Gerald Thornfield, Sir Edmund's son and heir, was 34 years old, and Gerald Thornfield, Sir Edmund's son and heir, was 34 years old, and had spent the last decade disappointing his father in every conceivable way. He had been sent down from Oxford, failed at the bar, and now lived a life of indolent comfort in London, sustained by a generous allowance and an apparently inexhaustible capacity for gambling and unsuitable women. Vivian Thornfield was Sir Edmund's younger sister, 49 years old, and twice married. Her first husband had died in a yachting accident. Her second had divorced her for reasons that were never spoken of in polite society. She was a striking woman still, theatrical in manner and dress, who moved in artistic circles in Paris and claimed to be writing a novel. Reginald Thornfield, Sir Edmund's younger brother, was the family solicitor and had been the executor of the late Lord Thornfield's will. He was a precise, meticulous man of 57, never married, who lived in chambers in Lincoln's Inn and whose greatest pleasure in life appeared to be the proper organization of legal documents. As the afternoon wore into evening, the guests assembled in the drawing-room for cocktails before dinner. The conversation was polite, carefully modulated, touching on neutral subjects, the weather, the state of the roads, the upcoming grouse season, but beneath the civility ran currents of tension that a sensitive observer might have detected. Gerald stood by the fireplace, smoking cigarette after cigarette, his eyes restless and troubled. Vivian reclined on the sofa with her companion, Monsieur Jacques Rousseau, discussing the spiritual bankruptcy of English society in a voice pitched to be overheard. Lady Margaret sat in her accustomed chair, her hands busy with needlework, saying little but watching everything. Reginald Thornfield arrived just as the dressing gong sounded. He was punctual, as always, his thin frame impeccably tailored, his greeting to each person measured and correct. When Sir Edmund suggested they retired to the study for a brief word before dinner, Reginald's expression did not change, but something flickered in his pale eyes. Also present was Dr. Philip Ashworth, the family physician, a jovial man of 50 with a red face and a hearty manner. He had been invited ostensibly for the shooting, but everyone knew that Sir Edmund's health had been precarious. Since his return from India, the doctor's black bag sat conspicuously in the hall. The final guest was Miss Lydia Pemberton, Lady Margaret's companion and distant cousin. She was a quiet woman of 40, self-effacing and observant, who had lived at Thornfield Manor for the past 5 years. Her position was ambiguous, neither quite family nor quite servant, and she navigated the household with careful discretion, Dinner was served at 8 o'clock in the great dining hall, where portraits of Thornfield ancestors gazed down from the panelled walls. The meal was elaborate: consomme d'over sole, roast pheasant, and a spectacular trifle. The conversation, however, remained strained despite the excellent wine. "I propose a toast," Sir Edmund announced as the dessert was cleared. His voice carried an edge that silenced the table. "To family, and to the resolution of all outstanding matters." The toast was drunk, but with little enthusiasm. Vivian's eyes narrowed. Gerald drained his glass and immediately refilled it. Reginald set down his wine untouched. "Edmund," Reginald said quietly, "perhaps this is not the time." "It is precisely the time," Sir Edmund interrupted. "We are all gathered here, and we shall discuss what must be discussed. After dinner, I should like everyone to assemble in the library. There are certain announcements I wish to make regarding my brother's estate and its disposition." "Father," Gerald began, but Sir Edmund raised his hand. "After dinner, Gerald, not before." The remainder of the meal passed in uncomfortable silence, broken only by the clink of silver on china and Dr. Ashworth's valiant attempts at cheerful conversation. Chapter 2: The Crime. The library at Thornfield Manor was Sir Edmund's private domain, a room lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound volumes, their spines gleaming in the lamplight. A fire burned in the massive stone fireplace despite the mild September evening, and the air was thick with the smell of old books, beeswax, and cigar smoke. At precisely 9 o'clock, the family assembled. Sir Edmund stood before the fireplace, his back to the flames, a sheaf of papers in his hand. His face was flushed, whether from the fire, the wine, or emotion, it was difficult to say. "I have asked you all here," he began without preamble, "because my brother's will has created a situation that cannot be allowed to continue. The terms of the trust are ... unsatisfactory. They bind this family to conditions that are intolerable." Reginald cleared his throat. "Edmund, as the executor, I must remind you that the will is legally binding. The trust cannot be broken without the agreement of all beneficiaries," Sir Edmund finished. Yes, I know. That is precisely why we are here. I intend to propose a settlement that will benefit everyone and free us from my brother's posthumous tyranny." Vivian laughed, a harsh sound. "Free us, or free you, Edmund. We all know what this is really about, the money." "It is not about money," Sir Edmund said coldly. "It is about family honor, about protecting the Thornfield name from scandal." "What scandal?" Gerald demanded. His face was pale, and his hands trembled slightly. "What are you talking about, father?" Sir Edmund's eyes swept the room, lingering in each face in turn. "My brother kept certain documents, letters, evidence of ... indiscretions. These papers are currently held by the trust. Under the terms of the will, they will be opened and made public in 6 months' time unless all beneficiaries agree to certain conditions." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the fire seemed to hold its breath. "That's blackmail," Vivian said finally. "Blackmail from beyond the grave." "It is leverage," Reginald corrected primly. Lord Thornfield wished to ensure the family maintains certain standards of behavior. "And what exactly did dear uncle know?" Gerald asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "What secrets did he hoard away, like some vicious old magpie?" Sir Edmund didn't answer directly. Instead, he turned to the desk and withdrew a small eye of the case. "I have here a proposal, a legal document that, if signed by all beneficiaries, will dissolve the trust and divide the estate equitably. More importantly, it will ensure that the ... sensitive materials are destroyed, unread." "And if we don't sign?" Vivian asked. "Then in 6 months, the world will know everything. Every secret, every shame, every betrayal." Sir Edmund's voice was flat. "I have no doubt that some of us will survive the scandal, but the family will not." Lady Margaret had said nothing throughout this exchange, but now she rose from her chair. "Edmund, this is unconscionable. You cannot ask people to—" "I can, and I must," Sir Edmund interrupted. "The document will remain here, on this desk. I expect everyone to review it and return here tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock with their decision. That is all I have to say." He placed the leather case on the desk and turned to leave. But as he reached the door, Gerald stepped in front of him. "What secrets, father? What did uncle know about me?" Sir Edmund looked at his son with an expression that might have been pity or contempt. "More than enough, Gerald, more than enough." The assembly broke up in disorder. Vivian swept out dramatically, Monsieur Rousseau following in her wake. Gerald remained by the door, staring at nothing. Reginald approached the desk and examined the leather case without touching it. Dr. Ashworth tactfully suggested that Lady Margaret might benefit from a sedative, an offer she declined with glacial politeness. By 10 o'clock, the house had settled into an uneasy quiet. The servants had retired to their quarters. The guests had withdrawn to their rooms. Only Sir Edmund remained in the library, seated at his desk, a glass of brandy at his elbow, staring into the dying fire. At 11 o'clock, Lady Margaret came down in her dressing gown to check on him. She found the library door locked. She knocked and called his name, but received no answer. Assuming he had fallen asleep in his chair, it would not have been the first time she returned to her room. At 7 o'clock the following morning, Hodges, the butler, brought Sir Edmund's morning tea, as he had done every day for 20 years. He found the library door still locked. This was unusual, but not unprecedented. He knocked discreetly and waited. When there was no response, he used his master key. The scream that echoed through Thornfield Manor brought everyone running. Sir Edmund Thornfield sat in his chair behind the desk, his eyes open and staring, his face a peculiar shade of grey. His right hand clutched his chest. His left lay palm up on the desk blotter. The brandy glass had fallen to the floor. The leather case containing the document was gone. Dr. Ashworth was the first to reach him. One look was enough. "He's dead," the doctor said. "Has been for hours, I'd say. 6, perhaps 7 hours. Heart attack." Lady Margaret asked faintly. She stood in the doorway, her face white as chalk. Dr. Ashworth bent closer, examining Sir Edmund's lips, his fingernails, the pupils of his staring eyes. When he straightened, his expression was grave. "No," he said slowly. "Not a heart attack. I believe poisoned. Sir Edmund has been." Chapter 3: Poirot arrives. The morning mist still clung to the grounds of Thornfield Manor when the small, egg-shaped man emerged from the black motorcar that had brought him from London. He was immaculately dressed in a dark suit of precise cut. His shoes gleaming despite the journey, his moustaches waxed to perfection. In his gloved hand he carried a slim walking stick, and his eyes green and extraordinarily intelligent took in every detail of the grey stone facade before him. "Mon ami," he murmured to the tall, military-looking gentleman who accompanied him. "Already I observe much. This is a house that keeps secrets, is it not?" Captain Arthur Hastings, formerly of His Majesty's Army and currently the friend and chronicler of the famous Belgian detective, nodded agreement. "Grim-looking place, certainly." Lady Margaret's telegram said only that Sir Edmund had died under suspicious circumstances, and that the family solicitor had suggested consulting you. "Ah, yes, Mr. Reginald Thornfield. I have had professional dealings with him in the past. A most methodical man. If he suspects murder, then murder, there certainly is." Hercule Poirot mounted the steps to the front entrance with his characteristic, precise gait. "Come, Hastings. Let us see what the little grey cells can make of this affair." They were received in the morning room by Lady Margaret, who had composed herself sufficiently to play hostess despite the tragedy. She was a handsome woman, Hastings observed, with excellent bone structure and remarkable self-control. Only the redness about her eyes and the slight tremor in her hands betrayed her distress. "M. Poirot, Captain Hastings. I am grateful you could come so quickly. I apologize for the irregular nature of the summons." Poirot bowed. "Madame, in the matter of death, there is no irregularity. There is only truth and untruth. Permit me to express my profound condolences on your loss." "Thank you." Lady Margaret gestured to chairs. The local police have already been Inspector Marsh from the county constabulary. He has examined the scene and questioned the household. But, double quotes, she paused delicately. He seems to believe my husband's death was natural despite Dr. Ashworth's suspicions. The police, they do not always see what is before their eyes, Poirot observed. This Inspector Marsh, he has departed. For the moment, he said he would return this afternoon after consulting with his superiors. Lady Margaret's mouth tightened. I believe he thinks Dr. Ashworth is mistaken. That Edmund died of a heart attack and that the doctor, being elderly and perhaps emotional, has allowed his imagination to run away with him. But you, madame, you do not believe this. Lady Margaret met Poirot's gaze directly. My husband was in excellent health, M. Poirot. Moreover, he was murdered. Of that I am certain. And why are you so certain? Because, Lady Margaret said quietly, there were people in this house who wished him dead. Poirot's eyebrows rose fractionally. Indeed. Then perhaps, madame, you will be so good as to tell me about these people. But first, I should like to view the scene where your husband died. Nothing has been disturbed. The body has been removed to the morning room, the other morning room, at the eastern end of the house. But the library remains as it was. I insisted upon it. Inspector Marsh was not pleased, but I told him that you were coming, and that you would wish to see everything exactly as it was found. You are a woman of great intelligence, madame. Poirot rose. Let us proceed. The library bore all the marks of a room where death had called unexpectedly. The chair behind the desk still bore the impression of Sir Edmund's body. The fallen brandy glass lay where it had rolled, its contents long since evaporated into a sticky stain on the Persian carpet. The morning tea service sat untouched on a side table, brought by the faithful Hodges, and abandoned in the shock of discovery. Poirot stood in the doorway for a long moment, his head tilted slightly to one side, his green eyes absorbing every detail. Then he moved forward with quick, precise steps, examining first the desk, then the chair, then the fallen glass. The brandy, he said. Where is the decanter from which it came? Lady Margaret indicated a sideboard against the wall. There, Edmund always took a glass before retiring. It was a habit of many years. Poirot examined the decanter carefully, removing the stopper and sniffing delicately. He wet his finger with a drop and touched it to his tongue, then spat immediately into his handkerchief. Bitter, he announced. There is something here that is not brandy. Captain Hastings, you will please to find me a clean bottle or flask. This decanter must be sent for analysis. While Hastings went in search of a suitable container, Poirot continued his examination. He studied the desk blotter with minute attention, producing a small magnifying glass from his pocket. He examined the lock on the library door, the windows, the ashes in the fireplace. He actually crawled, despite his immaculate suit under the desk, emerging with dust on his knees and a thoughtful expression. The document, he said at last. The leather case that contained it. This has disappeared. Yes. Yes, Lady Margaret confirmed. It was there on the desk when I came down at 11 o'clock and found the door locked. By morning, it was gone. Yet the door was locked from the inside. The windows were fastened. How then did the murderer enter and leave, taking the document with them? That, Lady Margaret said, is what I am hoping you will discover, M. Poirot. Poirot twirled one end of his moustache thoughtfully. There are, in the English detective stories that my friend Hastings so enjoys, often secret passages in old houses such as this. I do not suppose. None that I know of, Lady Margaret replied. Thornfield Manor is old, certainly, but it has been much modernized. My husband's grandfather did extensive renovations in the 1870s. Pity the secret passage, it would have been so convenient. Poirot smiled slightly. Very well. Then we must apply the little grey cells to the problem. Someone poisoned Sir Edmund, presumably in the brandy. Someone took the document after his death. Yet the room was locked from within. It is a pretty puzzle, is it not, Hastings? Hastings, who had returned with a clean bottle, nodded. A locked room mystery. Impossible, yet it happened. Nothing is impossible, mon ami. Merely improbable. And the improbable, when all else is eliminated, must be the truth. Poirot carefully decanted a sample of the brandy into the bottle, and stopped it firmly. Now, Lady Margaret, I must speak with everyone who was in the house last night, beginning, I think, with Dr. Ashworth, who first suspected poison, then the family members, one by one, and finally, the servants. You will please to arrange this. Of course, M. Poirot. Lady Margaret moved toward the door, then paused. There is one thing I should tell you. The document that was taken it pertained to my late brother-in-law's will. There was a trust, you see, with certain ... unusual provisions. Edmund had called the family together to discuss dissolving it. And these unusual provisions, they concerned secrets, matters that certain persons might wish to remain hidden. Lady Margaret's face remained composed, but her voice was tight. Yes, M. Poirot. Matters that certain persons would kill to keep hidden. Chapter 4. The Interviews. The morning room that served as Poirot's temporary headquarters was a pleasant chamber overlooking the rose garden. Hastings had arranged 2 chairs before the fireplace, with a small writing desk positioned to one side where he could take notes. Poirot himself stood at the window, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the September sunshine dapple the carefully tended flower beds. It is curious, Hastings, he remarked, how often murder comes to beautiful places. One would think that such surroundings would inspire only peaceful thoughts, yet, here we are. Human nature doesn't change with the scenery, Poirot Hastings observed. That is profoundly true. My friend Poirot turned as the door opened to admit Dr. Philip Ashworth. The doctor was a stout man with a red, jovial face that currently bore an expression of considerable distress. He had not, Hastings surmised, slept well. His eyes were bloodshot, and his usually hearty manner was subdued. Dr. Ashworth Poirot greeted him with a slight bow. I am grateful you could spare the time to speak with me. Please, be seated. You will take coffee. Thank you. No. I've had rather too much already this morning. The doctor sank into the offered chair with evident relief. Dreadful business, M. Poirot. Absolutely dreadful. I've known Edmund Thornfield for 20 years. Never thought I'd be declaring him murdered. But murdered you believe him to be. What led you to this conclusion? Dr. Ashworth ran a hand over his face. Several things. The color of his face, grayish, with a slight blue tinge about the lips. The smell, when I examined him closely, bitter almonds, very faint but unmistakable. The pupils of his eyes were contracted, and there was foam, just a trace, at the corners of his mouth. These symptoms, they suggest to you what substance? Cyanide, the doctor said flatly. Almost certainly potassium cyanide. The symptoms are classic. Death would have been relatively quick, 10 to 15 minutes at most. Probably quite painful, though perhaps not long enough for him to cry for help. And the source of this poison? You would say it was in the brandy. Where else? Edmund took a glass of brandy every night without fail. He was seated at his desk, the glass near to hand. It's the obvious vehicle. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Dr. Ashworth, I must ask you a question that may seem indelicate. You are the family physician, yes. You would know if Sir Edmund had any condition that might benefit from his death. The doctor's face flushed. If you're asking whether I had a motive to kill him, M. Poirot, the answer is no. Edmund was a friend as well as a patient. I've been coming to Thornfield Manor for shooting parties for 15 years. I had no reason to wish him dead. Forgive me, but that was not quite my question. I asked whether anyone might benefit from his death. The doctor's face flushed. If you're asking whether I had a motive to kill him, M. Poirot, the answer is no. Edmund was a friend as well as a patient. I've been coming to Thornfield Manor for shooting parties for 15 years. I had no reason to wish him dead. Forgive me, but that was not quite my question. I asked whether anyone might benefit from his death. Dr. Ashworth deflated slightly. Ah, yes. Well, I suppose the honest answer is that quite a few people might benefit. Edmund was not universally beloved. Perhaps you will tell me about the events of last evening. You were present at dinner and afterwards in the library, yes? Yes. Uncomfortable affair. Edmund was in a strange mood, excited, almost feverish. When he announced his intention to discuss his brother's will and the trust, I thought perhaps I should take him aside, suggest he postpone such serious matters until morning, but Edmund was not a man who welcomed medical advice about anything except his physical health. What can you tell me about this will? These secrets that were to be revealed? The doctor shifted uncomfortably. I know very little. Edmund's brother, Lord Thornfield, was an odd, reclusive, bitter, convinced that the family was deteriorating morally. When he died, there was talk of an unusual will, but the details were kept private. All I know is what Edmund said last night, that there were documents that would cause scandal if revealed, and that he wanted to suppress them by dissolving the trust. And who would these documents affect? That, I don't know, but I could hazard a guess. Dr. Ashworth leaned forward. Gerald, Edmund's son, has debts all over London. Gambling debts. Mainly, there are rumors he's got himself mixed up with some very unsavory people. Vivian, Edmund's sister, had a scandalous divorce. Her husband accused her of infidelity, though it was never proven. Reginald, the solicitor, is supposed to be beyond reproach, but he was executor of the will and knew its contents. Any of them might have had something to hide. And Lady Margaret. What of her? Dr. Ashworth's expression became guarded. Margaret is a fine woman, a pillar of strength. I cannot imagine her being involved in anything scandalous. Yet, you hesitate, Doctor. A long pause. There was a time, many years ago, when Margaret was close to a gentleman who was not her husband. Nothing came of it, she was far too proper. But, if Lord Thornfield had documented evidence of such an attachment, however innocent, it would devastate her. Poirot absorbed this in silence. Finally, he said, after the meeting in the library ended, what did you do? I went to my room, read for an hour, then went to bed. I heard nothing unusual during the night. Your room, it is where, in relation to the library? East wing, second floor. Too far to hear anything from the library, I'm afraid. And this morning, when you examined Sir Edmund, what was your first thought? Dr. Ashworth met Poirot's gaze squarely. My first thought was that I had failed as his physician. My second thought was that someone in this house was a murderer. After the doctor departed, Gerald Thornfield was shown in USA. Handsome man gone slightly to seed, with the telltale signs of dissipation about his eyes and mouth. His hands shook as he lit a cigarette, and Hastings detected the smell of whiskey on his breath despite the early hour. Mr. Thornfield, Poirot began, gently, I know this must be a difficult time for you. Difficult? Gerald laughed bitterly. My father's been murdered, and Poirot, the police think I did it. My creditors are circling like vultures. Yes, I'd say it's somewhat difficult. The police suspect you. Why is this? Because I inherit, of course. Well, partially. The estate is entailed, but there's a considerable sum in addition. Enough to settle my debts, and then some. Gerald drew deeply on his cigarette. I didn't kill him, and Poirot. God knows we had our differences, but he was my father. Tell me about these differences. Gerald's expression turned bitter. Where to begin? I disappointed him in every possible way. I was sent down from Oxford for gambling. Failed at the bar because I couldn't be bothered to study. I live in London on an allowance, running up debts faster than I can pay them. My father reminded me of my failures daily. Yet you came when he summoned you this weekend. Of course I came. He said it was about Uncle Izul. I hoped he might be offering to help with my debts. Instead, he made it clear that the secrets Uncle had gathered included documentation of everything I'd ever done wrong. What secrets specifically? Gerald's jaw tightened. I don't know. Edmund didn't specify, but I can guess. There was an incident in London 3 months ago. A gambling debt I couldn't pay. I did something, foolish, to raise the money. If that came out, I could face criminal charges. This foolish thing, you will tell me what it was. A long silence. Then, quietly, I forged a check on my father's account. He found out, paid it to avoid scandal, but swore he'd cut me off entirely if I ever did it again? And when Sir Edmund spoke last night of destroying these documents, how did you feel? Relieved, terrified, angry that Uncle had collected evidence against me like some sort of spy? Gerald stubbed out his cigarette with shaking fingers. But I didn't kill him, M. Poirot. I swear, I didn't. Where were you after the library meeting ended? In my room, drinking, if you must know. I finished off half a bottle of scotch, trying to figure out what to do. You saw no one? Heard nothing? Nothing. I passed out around midnight, and didn't wake until the screaming started. After Gerald left, Vivian Thornfield swept in like a theatrical storm, all flowing scarves and dramatic gestures. Monsieur Rousseau accompanied her, silent and watchful, his artist's eyes taking in every detail of the room. M. Poirot, Vivian declared, taking the chair without being invited. I am told you are investigating my brother's death. I hope you are better than that. Provincial policemen who questioned me this morning, as though I were a common criminal. Madame, I seek only the truth. You will forgive me if my questions seem impertinent. Oh, ask what you will. I have nothing to hide. This was said with such dramatic emphasis that Hastings was certain she had everything to hide. You were not fond of your brother. Fond Edmund was a tyrant, controlling, judgmental, obsessed with the family name and reputation. He made my life miserable. How so, madame? He disapproved of my lifestyle, my marriages, my friends. She glanced at Rousseau. My art. He thought I should be a proper English lady, hosting tea parties, and doing needleport. He never understood that I needed to live, to feel, to create. And this will of your late brother's concerned you as well. Vivian's face hardened. Oh yes, Edmund took great delight in informing me that our dear departed brother had documented all my indiscretions, my affairs, my debts, everything. He wanted me to sign away my inheritance to keep it quiet. But you did not wish to sign. I hadn't decided. Part of me wanted to tell Edmund and his precious reputation to go to hell. But scandal is expensive, M. Poirot. I might be unconventional, but I'm not a fool. Where were you after the library meeting? In my room with Jacques. We were there all night. She smiled at Rousseau, who nodded confirmation. You heard nothing unusual. Nothing. We were ... occupied. Poirot studied her for a long moment. Madame, I have one more question. Did you love your brother? Vivian's theatrical mask slipped for just an instant, and Hastings glimpsed something raw beneath. Once, she said quietly. A very long time ago. Chapter 5. Clues and Contradictions. Reginald Thornfield was the last of the family members to be interviewed, and he approached the task with the methodical precision of a lawyer accustomed to dealing with unpleasant but necessary matters. He seated himself with geometrical exactness in the center of the offered chair, placed his hands symmetrically on his knees, and met Poirot's gaze with pale, unwavering eyes. Mr. Thornfield, Poirot began, you were the executor of Lord Thornfield's will. You must have known its contents in detail. Naturally, it was my duty to understand every provision, and these documents that Lord Thornfield collected these secrets. You knew what they contained. Reginald's expression did not change. I was aware of their existence. I did not read them. They were sealed in a separate container, to be opened only under specific circumstances or at a specific date. Those circumstances being, if any beneficiary refused to comply with the behavioral conditions set forth in the will, or 6 months after Lord Thornfield's death, whichever came first. Behavioral conditions. You will explain these, please. Reginald recited, as if reading from a legal document. Gerald was to cease gambling and settle his debts within 6 months. Vivian was to end her current relationship and return to England. Sir Edmund was to make a public confession regarding certain activities during his time in India. Lady Margaret was to... He paused fractionally. The condition regarding Lady Margaret was not specified to me. How convenient, Poirot murmured. And if these conditions were met, the trust would be dissolved, the fortune distributed according to a standard inheritance structure, and the sealed documents would be destroyed unread. But Sir Edmund wished to circumvent these conditions. Yes, he proposed that all beneficiaries sign a document agreeing to dissolve the trust immediately, with the documents destroyed unread, in exchange for a somewhat reduced distribution of the estate. And you advised him on this matter. For the first time, Reginald's composure cracked slightly. I advised him against it. The will was legally sound. Attempting to circumvent it could have resulted in the entire estate being held in trust indefinitely, or worse, acceded to the crown. But Edmund would not listen. You must have been angry with him. I was frustrated. Edmund could be remarkably stubborn when he chose. Frustrated enough to kill him. Reginald actually smiled, a thin, cold expression. Poirot, if I had wished to kill my brother, I would have done so in a manner that could not possibly be traced to me. I am a solicitor. I understand the law and its loopholes intimately. Poisoning him in his own library, with a house full of suspects, would be remarkably inefficient. And yet someone did exactly that. Someone less intelligent than I. Reginald adjusted his spectacles. Which rather narrows the field, doesn't it? After the meeting in the library ended, where did you go? To my room. I reviewed certain legal documents until approximately midnight, then retired. You saw no one, heard nothing, unusual nothing. The leather case containing Sir Edmund's proposal has disappeared. Do you know what became of it? I do not. I presume the murderer took it. Why would they do so? Reginald considered this. To prevent the dissolution of the trust, perhaps. Or because the case contained something incriminating. Or simply to create confusion. Without examining it, I cannot say. After Reginald departed, Poirot sat in silence for several minutes, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Finally, he turned to Hastings. What do you make of it, mon ami? Hastings consulted his notes. Well, we have multiple suspects, all with motive. Gerald needs money desperately, and stands to inherit. Vivian resented Edmund's control and wanted to avoid scandal. Reginald was angry about Edmund's plan to circumvent Thruel. Even Lady Margaret might have had something to hide. The motive, it is indeed abundant. But the method, Hastings, the method, troubles me. Consider, Sir Edmund was poisoned by cyanide in his brandy. This brandy was in a decanter in his library, a room to which he alone had the key. How did the murderer introduce the poison? They could have done it earlier in the day. Possible, but risky. Anyone might have entered the library before Sir Edmund locked himself in for the evening. He might have offered brandy to a guest, and an innocent person would have died instead. Then they must have done it during the evening, while everyone was at dinner or afterwards. But the library was locked from within, and the windows were fastened. Yet we have established that someone not only poisoned the brandy, but also returned later after Sir Edmund was dead to steal the leather case. This person entered a locked room, twice committed murder, and departed without being seen. How Hastings, perhaps Edmund let them in, and locked the door again after they left, before he died. No, it does not make sense. Poirot rose and began to pace. There is something we are not seeing. Some detail that has been overlooked. The little grey cells, they tell me that the answer is before us, but we are looking at it incorrectly. A knock at the door interrupted them. Hodges, the butler, entered with his customary dignified bearing. Poirot, Lady Margaret has asked me to place myself at your disposal. If there is anything you wish to know about the household, I am to answer completely and honestly. Excellent. Hodges, is it not? Please, be seated. You have been with the family long. 40 years, sir. I entered service as a footman under Sir Edmund's father. Then you know this house and its inhabitants very well. Tell me on the night of the murder. Did you observe anything unusual? Hodges considered carefully. Several things, sir. Mr. Gerald appeared to be intoxicated at dinner, and became more so as the evening progressed. Miss Vivian and her companion argued in French in the hallway after the library meeting. I understand French, and I believe she was accusing him of being more interested in her money than her art. Mr. Reginald went to Sir Edmund's study rather than to his bedroom, though I cannot say why. This is most interesting. What else? Dr. Ashworth left the house at approximately 10:30. Sir Poirot's eyebrows rose. He left, but he told me he went to his room. He did say that, sir. But I saw him from the servants' staircase. He took his motorcar and drove away. He returned about an hour later. Did you mention this to Inspector Marsh? I was not asked, sir. Poirot exchanged a significant glance with Hastings. Hodges, you have been most helpful. One final question. The brandy decanter in the library. When was it filled? I filled it myself yesterday afternoon, sir, at approximately 4 o'clock. It is part of my regular duties. And between that time and when Sir Edmund locked himself in the library, who could have accessed it? Anyone, sir. The library is not generally locked during the day. Family, guests, even servants might have entered for legitimate purposes. After Hodges withdrew, Hastings turned to Poirot excitedly. The doctor lied. He said he was in his room all evening, but Hodges saw him leave. Poirot, do you think I think, mon ami, that this case grows more complex by the moment? Why would Dr. Ashworth lie about such a thing? Where did he go? And does his absence have anything to do with the murder? Poirot tugged at his moustaches. We must speak with him again. But first, I wish to examine something. What? The thing that has been troubling me from the beginning. The locked room. Come, Hastings. We returned to the scene of the crime. The library was empty when they entered, exactly as it had been that morning. Poirot stood in the center of the room, turning slowly in a complete circle, his eyes noting every detail. Observe, Hastings. The door was locked from the inside, the key was found in the lock. The windows are of the casement type, and they were all latched from within. There is no other visible exit, yet, somehow, the murderer entered, or at least introduced the poison. How? Hastings examined the windows carefully. They're secure. No way to unlatch them from outside, and the door. It is a solid oak door with a traditional lock, not the type that can be manipulated from the outside. Poirot knelt by the fireplace. What about the chimney? Too narrow for a person, and filthy besides. No one climbed down there. Poirot sat back on his heels, staring at the fireplace with intense concentration. Suddenly, his eyes widened. Hastings, the ashes. Do you observe them? They look like ordinary ashes to me. Ordinary ashes from burning wood, yes. But what is this? Poirot extracted a small fragment from the edge of the grate. It was partially burned, but the corner remained intact, showing the distinctive texture of fine leather. But how? The case. Hastings. The leather case that contained the document. It was burned here, in this fireplace. Poirot's eyes gleamed. But this tells us something important. It tells us that the murderer was here after Sir Edmund died. He took the case and burned it. But why? What was in that case that was worth destroying? Before Hastings could answer, the door opened abruptly. Lady Margaret stood in the doorway, her face pale. Poirot, you must come quickly. It's Miss Pemberton. She's collapsed in the drawing room. Dr. Ashworth is with her, but ... Lady Margaret's voice shook. He says she's been poisoned. Chapter 6. A second victim. Poirot moved with swift precision through the corridors of Thornfield Manor, Hastings following close behind. The drawing room presented a scene of controlled chaos. Miss Lydia Pemberton lay on the sofa, her face ashen, her breathing shallow and labored. Dr. Ashworth knelt beside her, his medical bag open, his red face now grey with concern. What has happened? Poirot demanded. Poison, Dr. Ashworth said grimly. The same symptoms as Sir Edmund, contracted pupils, grey complexion, the smell of bitter almonds, but she's still alive. I've administered amyl nitrite and given her an emetic. If we're fortunate, she may survive. When did this occur? Lady Margaret wrung her hands. 20 minutes ago, we were having tea. Lydia drank her cup and almost immediately began to gasp for breath. She collapsed before we could reach her. Poirot's eyes swept the room. A tea service sat on the low table, delicate china cups, a matching pot, a plate of biscuits. He moved to examine them, his nose twitching delicately over each piece. Which cup was hers? That one. Lady Margaret pointed with a trembling finger. The one with the blue flowers. Poirot lifted the cup carefully, sniffing the dregs. His expression became very still. This tea, it was prepared how? The usual way. I poured from the pot. Sugar and milk are added individually. According to preference. Lady Margaret's voice was barely above a whisper. Lydia takes hers with milk, no sugar. Who else was present? Only Vivian and myself. We were discussing the funeral arrangements when Lydia joined us. She seemed agitated about something, but wouldn't say what. Did she bring anything with her? Papers, perhaps. Now that you mention it, yes. She had an envelope. She placed it on the side table when she sat down. Lady Margaret looked around frantically. But I don't see it now. Poirot's jaw tightened. The envelope, what did it look like? Cream-colored, sealed. I noticed only because Lydia kept glancing at it, as if debating whether to speak of its contents. Hastings searched the room. Every corner. Find that envelope. Poirot turned back to the doctor. Will she live? I cannot say. The next hour will be critical. If the dose was smaller than what killed Sir Edmund, if I administered the antidote quickly enough, then perhaps. Dr. Ashworth wiped his brow. She must be moved to a bedroom where she can be properly monitored, then see to it. But, doctor, before you go, I must ask you something. Last night, you left Thornfield Manor at approximately 10:30. Where did you go? The color drained further from Dr. Ashworth's face. How did you know? The how is not important. The where, Dr. Ashworth. Where did you go? A long silence stretched between them. Finally, the doctor spoke, his voice heavy with defeat. To my surgery in the village, I had to verify something in my medical journals. After Sir Edmund's announcement about the documents, I was concerned that he stopped. Concerned about what? Concerned about something Lord Thornfield might have discovered. Something medical. Something that occurred many years ago. Dr. Ashworth met Poirot's gaze. I am not proud of it. Poirot, but I did nothing illegal. A patient came to me, a young woman in distress. I helped her, that is all I can say. This patient, she was connected to the Thornfield family. I cannot break doctor-patient confidentiality, even after all these years. Even if it means a murderer goes free. Dr. Ashworth's face set in stubborn lines. My professional oath means everything to me. I have already said too much. Before Poirot could press further, Vivian rushed into the room, her theatrical composure entirely abandoned. What's happened? The servants are saying Lydia's been poisoned. Is it true? It is true, madame, and unless we discover who is doing this killing, it may not be the last. Poirot's voice was sharp. You were here when Miss Pemberton collapsed. Did you see anything suspicious? Suspicious. We were having tea. The only unusual thing was that Lydia seemed nervous. She kept looking at that envelope she'd brought, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't quite bring herself to speak. And you noticed nothing else? No one entering or leaving. Monsieur Rousseau came in briefly to ask if I wanted to take a walk, but I declined. Lydia had only just arrived, and I thought it would be rude to leave. Vivian's eyes widened. You don't think, Jacques? I think nothing yet, madame. I observe and I consider. Poirot turned as Hastings emerged from behind the sofa, his expression grim. Poirot, I've found it. But you won't like what it contains. The envelope had been shoved behind a cushion, hastily concealed. Poirot opened it with careful fingers and extracted a single sheet of paper covered in neat, feminine handwriting. As he read, his expression grew increasingly grave. Mon Dieu, he murmured. This changes everything. What is it? Lady Margaret asked faintly. Poirot looked up, his green eyes somber. It is a confession, madame, written by Miss Pemberton. She states that she witnessed someone entering the library on the night of Sir Edmund's murder. Someone who had access to the brandy decanter, someone whom she never suspected of being capable of such evil, who, Vivian demanded, who did she see? The name is not written here. She states only that she was afraid to come forward, but that her conscience would not allow the crime to go unpunished. She was bringing this letter to Lady Margaret to reveal the truth. Poirot's voice was cold. The murderer saw her with the envelope, realized what it must contain, and acted quickly to silence her. Then whoever did this must still be in the house, Hastings said. We must search everyone, question them again. Nan, mon ami. That will only put the murderer on guard. They have already attempted to kill twice. They will not hesitate to kill again if they feel cornered. Poirot folded the letter carefully and placed it in his pocket. We must approach this with subtlety. With method. A groan from the sofa interrupted them. Miss Pemberton's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and frightened. Her lips moved, but no sound emerged. Lydia. Lady Margaret rushed to her side. Don't try to speak, you're safe now. But Miss Pemberton grasped Lady Margaret's hand with surprising strength, her eyes desperate. She struggled to form words, her voice barely a whisper. The library, ... I saw ... Yes, Poirot leaned close. You saw who? Tell me the name. I saw ... the key ... Her eyes rolled back and she lost consciousness again. Dr. Ashworth checked her pulse anxiously. She's alive, but barely. We must move her immediately. As the doctor supervised Miss Pemberton's removal to a bedroom, Poirot stood motionless, his brow furrowed in concentration. The key, he murmured. She saw the key. But what does this mean, Hastings? Perhaps she saw the murderer with the key to the library, but Edmund locked himself in. How could anyone else have had a key? Exactly so, yet Miss Pemberton thought this information important enough to risk her life revealing it. Poirot's eyes gleamed suddenly. Mon ami, I begin to see a glimmer of light in this darkness. We must examine the library door and its lock most carefully. There is something about that key that is significant, something we have missed. They returned to the library, and Poirot subjected the door and lock to minute inspection. He removed the key from the lock and examined it under his magnifying glass, turning it this way and that in the light from the window. Hastings, bring me the keys from the other main rooms. The drawing room, the dining room, the morning room. I wish to compare them. While Hastings fetched the keys, Poirot continued his examination. When Hastings returned, Poirot laid all the keys side by side on the desk blotter. Observe, mon ami. These are all similar keys, the same vintage, probably made by the same locksmith when the house was renovated. They are, to the casual eye, almost identical. But not to your eye? Nan, look here, the teeth of the library key. They show signs of recent filing. Someone has altered this key, very slightly, very carefully, and here he produced a small metal file from his pocket and held it to the light. Traces of brass. Someone has been filing a key. Hastings recently, but why would someone file the library key? Not the library key, my friend, a duplicate key. Someone made a copy of the library key and filed it to ensure it worked perfectly. Poirot's voice was grim. That is how the murderer entered the locked room. They had their own key. Sir Edmund believed himself safely locked in, but the murderer could enter at will. Then the locked room mystery isn't a mystery at all. It is and it is not. The question remains, who had the opportunity to make such a copy? And when did they do so? Poirot paced the room, his hands clasped behind his back. This was not a crime of sudden passion, Hastings. This was planned, carefully, methodically planned. The murderer knew about the will, about the documents, about Sir Edmund's nightly brandy. They prepared a duplicate key. They obtained cyanide, not an easy substance to acquire. They waited for the perfect moment. The weekend party. Precisely. A house full of suspects, all with motive. A perfect screen of confusion behind which the real murderer could hide. Poirot stopped pacing suddenly. But they made mistakes. Hastings. Everyone makes mistakes. The burned leather case, why burn it if they had already removed the incriminating document? Miss Pemberton's envelope, why not destroy it immediately rather than merely hiding it? And now, the attack on Miss Pemberton herself, an act of desperation that tells us the murderer is feeling threatened. So what do? We set a trap, mon ami. A trap that will force our murderer to reveal themselves. Poirot's smile was cold. But first, I must speak with someone who has not yet been entirely truthful with me. I must speak with Lady Margaret. Chapter 7. The Widow's Secret. Lady Margaret received Poirot in the small sitting room adjacent to her bedroom. She sat rigidly in a high-backed chair, her hands folded in her lap with deceptive calm. Poirot noticed the tension in her jaw and the slight tremor in her fingers. Lady Margaret, I must ask questions that may cause distress, but I must have the truth. Lives depend upon it, Poirot began gently. I have told you everything I know, M. Poirot. Have you, Madame? Lord Thornfield's will contained conditions for each beneficiary. Dr. Ashworth mentioned your condition was never specified to him. But you knew what it was, did you not? Lady Margaret's face remained composed, but her knuckles whitened. I knew, and will you tell me? A long silence filled the room. When Lady Margaret finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. I was to confess to Edmund the truth about our marriage. A truth I have kept hidden for 35 years. And this truth, Madame. Lady Margaret raised her eyes to meet Poirot's gaze. I never loved my husband, M. Poirot. Our marriage was arranged a suitable match between good families. I did my duty. I bore him a son. I managed his household. But I never loved him. This is unfortunate, perhaps, but not scandalous. Madame, there is more. Lady Margaret's voice grew stronger. Before my marriage, I was in love with someone else. A man my family considered unsuitable. My father forbade the match. I married Edmund as duty demanded. But I never forgot my first love. And this man, he was Robert Ashworth, Dr. Ashworth's younger brother. He died in the war, at the Somme, in 1916. Lady Margaret's eyes glistened. He wrote to me, in those last years. Letters full of love and longing. Letters that would have ruined me if they became public. I thought I had destroyed them all, but apparently, Lord Thornfield found them. Poirot absorbed this quietly. And Sir Edmund, he knew of this attachment. He suspected, I think, but he never knew for certain. Lord Thornfield's condition would have forced me to confess everything. Lady Margaret's composure cracked. I could not bear it, M. Poirot, so you wished the documents destroyed. Yes, God help me, yes, enough to kill for them. Lady Margaret's eyes flashed. I did not kill my husband, M. Poirot. Whatever my feelings, I am not a murderer. I am merely a woman who made a choice 35 years ago and has lived with the consequences. And Dr. Ashworth, does he know of these letters? Philip, no. Robert and I were very discreet. Philip knew his brother and I were fond of each other, but nothing more. He has been a good friend over the years. Poirot rose and moved to the window. Lady Margaret, I believe you. But you are not telling me everything. Miss Pemberton was your companion for 5 years. She was privy to household secrets. What did she know? Lady Margaret hesitated. Lydia knew about the letters. She helped me search for them after Lord Thornfield died, hoping to find and destroy them before the trust was opened. And on the night of the murder, where was Miss Pemberton? In her room, I assumed. Why? Because, Madame, she wrote that she witnessed someone entering the library. If she was in her room, how could she have seen this? Lady Margaret's face paled. Her room overlooks the side entrance to the library. There is a servant's door there, rarely used. Then perhaps they believed themselves unobserved. But Miss Pemberton saw them. Poirot turned back. This servant's door, it too, has a lock. Yes. The same type as the main library door. Then, our murderer may have made 2 keys. They could enter through the servant's entrance, unseen from the main corridor, do their work, and depart. Poirot's expression was grim. Miss Pemberton's room, may I examine it? Lady Margaret rose. Of course. But M. Poirot, will Lydia survive? Dr. Ashworth believes there is hope, but she remains in grave danger. If the murderer learns she still lives, they may try again. Miss Pemberton's bedroom was small but comfortable. The window overlooked the side of the house. Poirot stood there, studying the view. From this vantage point, he could clearly see the servants' entrance, a plain door, half hidden by ivy. On the night of the murder, was there a moon? Poirot asked. 3/4 full, Lady Margaret replied. Then there would have been light enough to see someone entering this door. Poirot examined the window. This opens. Yes, Lydia often slept with it partially open, so she could have heard, as well as seen. Poirot surveyed the room. A small writing desk held correspondence. A bookshelf contained devotional works. On the bedside table lay a Bible and a half-finished letter. Poirot examined the desk drawers methodically. In the bottom drawer, hidden beneath writing paper, he found a small leather-bound journal. "Did you know Miss Pemberton kept a diary?" he asked. Lady Margaret looked surprised. No, Lydia was very private. Poirot opened the journal carefully. It contained observations about the household. He read several pages, his eyebrows rising. Miss Pemberton was far more observant than anyone realized, he murmured. She documents Gerald's gambling debts, Vivian's affair with Monsieur Rousseau, Reginald's visits to a gambling establishment. Even Dr. Ashworth is mentioned secret trips at odd hours. He turned the page. And here an entry from 3 months ago. Miss Pemberton records overhearing an argument between Sir Edmund and Lady Margaret. Sir Edmund accused you of carrying on a correspondence with someone. Lady Margaret flushed. That was about the letters. Robert's effects were returned to Philip, who found some of my letters and returned them without reading them. But Edmund learned of this exchange. He convinced himself Philip and I were having an affair. And were you? Certainly not. Philip is a friend, nothing more. Poirot closed the journal. Lady Margaret, I wish you to gather everyone in the drawing room this evening at 8 o'clock. Tell them I have important information to share. You know who killed Edmund. I am beginning to see the truth. Madame de Zibnan, we will reveal our murderer. Chapter 8. The Gathering. At 8 o'clock, the drawing room held a subdued assembly. Gerald stood by the fireplace, haggard, clutching whiskey. Vivian reclined on the sofa beside Monsieur Rousseau. Did it? Patience. First, let me tell you what I discovered. Sir Edmund was poisoned with cyanide in his brandy. The library was locked from inside, yet someone entered after his death to steal and burn a document. This same person attempted to murder Miss Pemberton when she threatened to reveal what she witnessed. We know this, Vivian said impatiently. Then I will tell you about the key. A ripple of tension passed through the room. The library door was found locked from within, but I discovered the key had been recently file-altered to create a duplicate. Someone possessed a copy and used it to enter the locked room. Impossible, Reginald said sharply. I have the only other key in my office. There is a servant's entrance to the library. This door also has a lock using the same type of key. Someone clever could have made a wax impression and filed a duplicate. Dr. Ashworth leaned forward. Who had opportunity? Anyone in this house. Keys hang in the butler's pantry, easily accessible. The question is not who had opportunity, but who had necessary knowledge and skill. All eyes turned to Reginald, whose face flushed with anger. I accuse no one yet. I merely state facts. But let us consider the poison. Cyanide is not easily obtained. Dr. Ashworth, as a physician, would have access, but so might others. Are you accusing me? Dr. Ashworth's face reddened. Again, I state facts. The brandy was poisoned between 4 o'clock and 11 o'clock. During this period, the library was accessible to anyone. Then any of us could be the murderer, Vivian said. On the contrary, it narrows the field considerably. The murderer made critical errors. First, they burned the leather case in the fireplace, leaving traces. Why burn an empty case unless they feared it might incriminate them? Perhaps it contained fingerprints, Reginald suggested. If the murderer wore gloves, there would be no fingerprints. No, they burned it for another reason, because it was not empty. Shocked silence filled the room. Not empty. Lady Margaret breathed. The document Sir Edmund showed you was a copy. The original remained in the case. When the murderer realized this, they had to destroy it quickly, even at risk of leaving evidence. What did this original contain? Inspector Marsh asked. I believe it contained names of beneficiaries and, more importantly, Specific secrets Lord Thornfield had discovered. Secrets Sir Edmund had not fully read. The murderer needed to destroy this before anyone could read it, because it contained proof of something far worse than gambling debts or affairs. It contained proof of a previous crime. Gerald dropped his glass. It shattered on the hearth. "What crime?" Vivian whispered. "The death of Lord Thornfield himself." The room erupted into chaos. Gerald shouted denials. Vivian gasped. Reginald rose, his face white. Dr. Ashworth gripped his chair. Silence. Poirot's voice cut through the uproar. "Inspector, ensure no one leaves." The inspector moved to block the door. "Lord Thornfield died 6 months ago. His death was attributed to heart failure. But I received a telegram from a colleague who examined his medical records. He found irregularities. Lord Thornfield's symptoms were consistent not with heart failure, but with poisoning. Slow poisoning over weeks." Dr. Ashworth was on his feet. "That's absurd. I attended him." "There was no poisoning." "You attended him." "Yes." "You signed the death certificate. You certified cardiac arrest as cause of death." "Because that's what it was." "Was it? Or did you certify false cause of death to protect someone? Someone who had been slowly administering poison. Someone who stood to inherit." Dr. Ashworth's face crumpled. He sank back into his chair. "I didn't know. Not for certain. But I suspected. The symptoms were unusual. When I ran private analysis of blood samples I had kept, I found traces of arsenic, but by then Lord Thornfield was dead, and you said nothing. How could I? Had no proof of who administered the poison. Two voiced suspicions would have destroyed the family. I thought his death would be the end. I never imagined they would kill again, but they did, Doctor, because Sir Edmund threatened to expose secrets that could not be allowed to come to light. Secrets including the truth about Lord Thornfield's death." Poirot turned to face the assembled company, his eyes hard as jade. "One of you murdered Lord Thornfield. One of you murdered Sir Edmund. One of you tried to murder Miss Pemberton, and I know which one." Chapter 9: The Revelation. The silence was absolute. Poirot surveyed the suspects with his penetrating gaze. "Let me tell you the story of this crime. It begins not 6 months ago, but many years before. It begins with secrets, the kind that fester and poison relationships, that drive people to desperate acts." He paused, letting his words settle. Lord Thornfield was a bitter man who believed his family had strayed from virtue. He collected evidence of their sins, but he made a fatal error. He shared his knowledge with one person, confident they would help execute his plan. That person was his murderer. Who was it? Inspector Marsh demanded. Patience. The murderer had to be someone with regular access to Lord Thornfield's household, someone he trusted, someone with medical knowledge to administer poison in small doses, someone who knew about the will and understood those documents would expose not only family secrets, but the truth about Lord Thornfield's death. Dr. Ashworth's face was grey. M. Poirot, I swear. You swear you did not kill him, and I believe you, because the murderer is not you. Relief flooded Dr. Ashworth's face. Then who? Poirot turned to Lady Margaret. Madame, I must ask you again about Miss Pemberton. You said she was your companion for 5 years. But she was also something else. What was her relationship to Lord Thornfield? Lady Margaret's hands clenched. She was his private nurse during his final illness. He insisted upon someone from the family. Lydia was a distant cousin with nursing training. She seemed perfect. And during this time, she had unlimited access to his rooms, his food, his medications. Yes, but Lydia would never. What? What was Miss Pemberton's financial situation when she came to work for your brother-in-law? Lady Margaret hesitated. She was in difficulty. Her father had died, leaving debts. She needed the position desperately, and Lord Thornfield helped with these debts. He was very generous. He paid them off and settled an annuity on her. An annuity that would continue after his death. Yes, that was in his will. Poirot nodded. And this annuity was contingent upon certain conditions. All eyes turned to Reginald, who spoke in a whisper. The annuity was contingent upon Miss Pemberton's continued discretion regarding certain matters she observed while nursing Lord Thornfield. If she spoke of these matters, the annuity would be forfeit. And what were these matters? Reginald's face was ashen. I thought they referred to embarrassing details about his final illness. I never suspected horror dawned in his eyes. My God, she killed him. No, Lady Margaret was on her feet. Lydia would never, but she did. Madame, she killed Lord Thornfield slowly overeats small doses of arsenic in his food, medicine, tea. She was his nurse. Who would question her care? But why? Vivian demanded. Because Lord Thornfield discovered something about Miss Pemberton. Something from her past that she could not allow to be known. Poirot moved to the centre. I made inquiries this afternoon. Miss Pemberton was not always a genteel companion. 20 years ago, she was married to a wealthy merchant in Manchester. When he died suddenly of food poisoning, she inherited his fortune. 2 years later, she married again another wealthy elderly man. He too died suddenly. She inherited again. When she married her third husband, people began asking questions. When he died in identical circumstances, an investigation was launched. The room was silent. But there was insufficient evidence. Bodies had been cremated. Symptoms could have been natural illness. She was never prosecuted, but society shunned her. She fled Manchester, changed her name slightly, and eventually came to work for Lord Thornfield, claiming to be a distant cousin. Lady Margaret swayed. This cannot be true. I am afraid it is. Lord Thornfield, with his passion for uncovering secrets, discovered her identity. He confronted her. Perhaps he planned to expose her. Perhaps he wanted to control her. We will never know, but Miss Pemberton could not allow her past revealed. She would have been arrested, tried for murder, hanged. So she did the only thing she could, she killed him. But the trust, Reginald objected. The sealed documents would expose her. That is the clever part. Miss Pemberton convinced Lord Thornfield to seal away his evidence. She told him the threat of exposure would be more effective than exposure itself. That fear would keep the family in line. Lord Thornfield agreed. He sealed the documents. Miss Pemberton believed herself safe as long as those documents remained sealed. Then why kill Sir Edmund? Inspector Marsh asked. Because Sir Edmund threatened to dissolve the trust and destroy the documents without reading them. Miss Pemberton could not allow those documents destroyed without ensuring evidence of her crimes was eliminated first. She needed to see what Lord Thornfield had written about her. Poirot paused, so she made her plan. She obtained cyanide. She created a duplicate key using metalworking tools in the estate workshop. On the night of the murder, after Sir Edmund locked himself in, she entered through the servant's door. Sir Edmund was already feeling poison effects she had placed in the brandy earlier. She waited until he died, then took the leather case, intending to destroy only pages concerning her. But she didn't. Hastings interjected. Nan. When she opened the case and read the document by candlelight, she realized her error. Lord Thornfield had not merely documented her murders, he had obtained legal proof. Affidavits from witnesses in Manchester, copies of death certificates, medical reports suggesting arsenic poisoning. It was all there. Miss Pemberton realized destroying only her section would be obvious. Numbered pages would show something missing. So she made a desperate decision. She burned the entire document. But that would expose her, Vivian said. Not if she could deflect suspicion onto others. Not if she could pretend to be an innocent witness identifying the real killer. That is why she wrote the confession this afternoon, not a real confession, but carefully worded letter suggesting she had seen someone else commit murder. She planned to give it to Lady Margaret, knowing Lady Margaret would inform me. She would describe seeing someone enter with a key someone else. This would make her appear heroic witness rather than killer. Then who poisoned her tea? Gerald demanded. Poirot's expression was grim. No one. Miss Pemberton poisoned herself. A collective gasp filled the room. Impossible, Dr. Ashworth protested. The poisoning was real, but it was self-administered. Miss Pemberton took a carefully measured dose enough to produce dramatic symptoms, but not enough to kill. especially with quick medical intervention. She knew you would be here, Doctor. She knew you would administer antidote immediately. She gambled her life on the timing. But why? Lady Margaret's voice was anguished. To appear as a second victim. To establish beyond doubt she could not be the killer. After all, who would suspect a dying woman? It was desperate, but Miss Pemberton is a desperate woman. She has killed at least 4 people. She could not allow herself caught now. You said, is or was. Which is it? Reginald asked. She lives, barely. Dr. Ashworth's quick action saved her. She is under guard in her bedroom. When she recovers, she will face justice. Inspector Marsh cleared his throat. This is theory, not proof. How do we know you're right? Poirot smiled thinly. An excellent question. Fortunately, I have proof. When I searched Miss Pemberton's room, I found more than her journal. Hidden in a false bottom of her writing desk, I found a small vial containing cyanide powder. I found detailed notes on lockpicking and key duplication. And most damning, I found a letter. He produced a folded paper. This letter was written by Lord Thornfield to Miss Pemberton 3 weeks before his death. In it, he confronts her with knowledge of her past. He offers her a choice: remain in his employ under his complete control, or face exposure and prosecution. He promises if she obeys absolutely, her secret will die with him. But if she betrays him, the evidence will be revealed. Poirot's voice grew cold. Miss Pemberton chose a third option. She killed him. And when that killing was threatened with exposure, she killed again. She is one of the most cold-blooded murderers I have encountered. Chapter 10. Justice Served. 3 days later, pale morning sun filtered through curtains of Miss Pemberton's bedroom. She lay propped against pillows, her face still grey, but her eyes alert. Poirot sat beside the bed, expression grave. Inspector Marsh stood by the door. You know, don't you? Miss Pemberton's voice was barely a whisper. I know, mademoiselle. I have known for some time. The question is whether you will confirm my deductions or force us to proceed with evidence alone. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Miss Pemberton nodded slowly. I will tell you, not because I seek mercy, I know, there is none, but because I am tired. So very tired of running, of hiding, of living in fear that each day might be the day my past catches up. Poirot inclined his head. Then speak. Tell me the truth. And so she spoke. Words came slowly at first, then faster, as if a dam had broken. She told of her first husband, a cruel man twice her age who beat her. She told of the arsenic meant for rats that became her instrument of liberation. She told of the second husband, kind but suffocating, and how the poison had become easier once the first barrier was broken. By the third husband, she admitted, she had become monstrous, a woman who married for money and murdered for convenience. I thought I had escaped. I changed my name, my history. I became meek, Lydia Pemberton, poor relation, grateful for any position. For 15 years, I lived quietly, harming no one. I thought I was free. But Lord Thornfield discovered your secret. Yes. He was obsessed with genealogy, with family histories. He traced my lineage, trying to confirm my relationship to Lady Margaret. What he found instead was my true identity. He confronted me with newspaper clippings from Manchester, with records of my 3 marriages and 3 convenient widowhoods. He told me he had gathered proof that would see me hanged. And so you killed him. What choice did I have? Emotion crept into her voice. He would have destroyed me. I had finally found peace, a place where I belonged, people who valued me. Lady Margaret treated me with kindness. I could not lose that. So you poisoned him slowly, making it appear natural. It was easy. I was his nurse. No one questioned what I gave him, what I put in his food, and Sir Edmund. Miss Pemberton's face hardened. Edmund was going to destroy the documents without reading them. He didn't care what secrets they contained. He wanted only to protect his family name. But those documents were my death warrant. I had to see them, to destroy the evidence. I had no choice but to kill Edmund before he could carry out his plan. You had a choice, mademoiselle. You have always had a choice. You chose murder. Again and again. Tears ran down her face. I am a monster, M. Poirot, I know this, but I was made a monster by circumstances. My first husband you knew what he did to me. Many women live in difficult marriages. They do not all become murderers. You cannot excuse for deaths by claiming justification for the first. Miss Pemberton wiped her eyes. No, you are right. I am beyond excuse, beyond redemption. I ask only that you tell Lady Margaret I am sorry. She was kind, and I repaid her kindness with deception and murder. Inspector Marsh stepped forward. Pemberton, I am arresting you for the murders of Lord Thornfield and Sir Edmund Thornfield. You will be taken to London to await trial. As constables entered, Miss Pemberton looked at Poirot one final time. When did you know it was me? Poirot considered. I suspected when I learned of the servant's entrance and its view from your window. I became certain when I found the journal and hidden compartment. But truly, I knew when I realized the locked room was not impossible, but inevitable. Only someone with careful planning could have executed such a crime. You were too perfect in your role as invisible companion, too careful in your observations. It is the invisible people who often see and do the most. A week later, Poirot and Hastings stood on Thornfield Manor grounds, preparing to depart. Lady Margaret walked with them to the motor car. I still cannot quite believe it. Lydia lived under my roof for 5 years. I trusted her completely. How could I have been so blind? You saw what she wanted you to see, Madame. That is the nature of such people. They are chameleons, adapting to their environment, showing only what will keep them safe. Poirot took her hand gently. You must not blame yourself. The trial will be in 3 months. They tell me she will almost certainly hang. That is for the courts to decide. My role is finished. What of the others? Gerald, Vivian, Reginald. They all had secrets. All had motives. Poirot smiled slightly. The sealed documents were destroyed. Whatever secrets Lord Thornfield collected died with him and with the murderer. Perhaps that is for the best. Your family can begin again, without the weight of the past. Lady Margaret nodded. Perhaps you are right. Gerald has sworn he will reform. Vivian has returned to Paris. Reginald continues with his practice. We are fractured but not destroyed. And you, Madame, what will you do? I shall continue here, at Thornfield Manor. It is my home, whatever tragedies it has witnessed. The estate must be managed. Life continues, and Poirot, even after death. That is very true. And it is the living who must find courage to continue. Poirot bowed over her hand. If you ever have need of my services again, you have only to ask. I hope I never have need of a detective again. As the motorcar pulled away, Hastings glanced at his friend. A sad case, Poirot. That woman, Miss Pemberton, she was a victim once, wasn't she? Before she became a monster. Perhaps, mon ami, perhaps. But the law does not recognize degrees of monstrosity. She killed 4 people. She will hang for it. That is justice. Is it, though? Justice, I mean. It seems rather absolute. Poirot was silent for a long moment, watching Thornfield Manor recede. Justice is always absolute, Hastings. It is mercy that admits degrees, and mercy, I think, is beyond my province. I am merely the instrument that uncovers truth. What society does with that truth is not for me to decide. They drove on through the autumn countryside, leaving behind the shadow of Thornfield Manor and its dead. Behind them, in the garden, the roses continued to bloom, indifferent to human tragedy, beautiful in their brief season before the coming winter. I am glad that you are till here. Please like the video and subscribe the channel. Thanks for watching.